Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Diana Martin. I'm the Executive Director here at Hourglass, and I'd like to welcome you to today's First Friday Forum on the Little Conestoga Blue-Green Corridor project. Appreciate everyone's patience. We're starting a couple minutes late today. We're known to be very prompt here at Hourglass, but we were just making sure we could get our live stream audience on with us today as well. Today we're joined by John Cox, who you might know as the former president and CEO of Turkey Hill. He's been dedicating his retirement years to consulting projects focused on clean water and the Conestoga River. He's joined by Brent Good, Senior Project Manager at ELA Group, and Cory Rathman, Senior Project Manager at LandStudies. The project we're going to learn more about today is an $18 million effort initiated by the Steinman Foundation to restore 1.3 miles of the Little Conestoga Creek while adding 3 miles of trails connecting Lancaster City to surrounding parks, entertainment venues, and essential services. After their talk, we will have time for questions from the audience, including those of you in the room and those of you joining virtually on the live stream. So if you're watching online, please just drop your questions in the chat and I will monitor those. So thank you all so much for being here. I know it's Good Friday and a couple of you are off work today and are still spending your day with us. So I really appreciate you being here. And I'd also like to thank our First Friday Forum sponsors, Rogers & Associates and Millersville University and the Ware Center for hosting us today. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand it over to our presenters and excited to learn more about today's project. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Diana, and thank you all for being here. I appreciate your interest in the project. I was driving downtown today and I ended up parking several blocks up. There was so much traffic, so much activity downtown. I thought, you know what, it's a nice day. I'll walk down instead of trying to find a parking lot closer. But I had to think back to my early days here in Lancaster County when I could drive right down to what then was called the Claybell Building on King Street. I could drive to any parking lot I wanted to. There were empty spaces all the time, and I never had any trouble getting in and out of the city because there wasn't anybody down here. And look at the city we have today. It's really pretty amazing, isn't it? And that is something you can begin to take for granted, but it is a real treasure. And some of it's the Ware Center, and it's Millersville, and it's the people who have invested in the Fulton. And if you think about where might other things come along as you look into the future, that would also add to the well-being of our county, the quality of life that we have here in our county. I dare say, spur further economic development, entice people who are young to stay here instead of leaving and go somewhere else. We're going to talk about some of that today. I think that you're going to hear some things that would help you see a vision looking out into the future that would add to that. So. We're going to talk about the project itself and give you some information on that. We're going to describe why the project was undertaken, what it's going to accomplish, and what we think the benefits to Lancaster are going to be. And let me just start with, let's see, being able to manage a clicker, right? Here we go. Yeah, there we go. So that went backwards. See that? I'm not that good at it, am I? Anyway, that's the one I want. There we go. So there is a countywide action plan for cleaning up our streams. I don't know how many of you would know, but I'll bet you not many of you would know. A few of you in this room, I think, are probably aware of that. And it is a chapter in the Watershed Improvement Plan for the Chesapeake Bay, which is really a Pennsylvania document that's a part of a bigger package that EPA oversees. And it's this big thing out there and whatever. But its importance to us here in Lancaster County is it's a blueprint for cleaning up our streams. So a lot of times we think about the Chesapeake Bay and the work in our streams as this compliance with Chesapeake Bay and who cares and I don't know whether I should care or whatever. Well, we have 1,400 miles of streams here in Lancaster County. 1,400 miles, and they are a natural treasure. They are an asset for us here. And this vision of cleaning up our county streams and making them clean and clear by 2040 is a vision that's been adopted as a part, in a sense, of Places 2040. If you go read that document, it refers to the work that we ought to do over the next 20 years. But it is also a vision that our environmental groups who are working on this have adopted and have looked at, and the Steinman Foundation has realized, hey, this is a significant undertaking. It's going to take a lot of support as we go along. So I would dare say most of the people here, I didn't grow up in Lancaster. I came here in my teens, but most of the folks here today grew up thinking of our streams as dirty little runoff things. When we think about the Conestoga River, what do you think of? You think of muddy, brown, ugly, all that kind of stuff. But the Conestoga River is in fact a beautiful river, and it has a lot of potential. Now, what we don't realize is it wasn't always this way, and we don't realize that our streams don't have to be this way. There really is an opportunity, and it's already underway, to clean up our streams. And the vision that it would be done by 2040. Done is, what does that mean exactly? We can talk about it, right? But it's in process already, and we will continue to see significant changes. I can remember when I first came to Lancaster County, I could see bubbly muck out on the Conestoga River down at Ingleside. That's been addressed. The county has a consent decree. It's doing some things. I won't go down through the whole long list. I'd go out to the Susquehanna River and think there's no way in the world I would get in this thing. I go out there now and I go, it's not bad. I've been in it, I've swam, I've water skied on it. Life has changed. We lose sight of the fact that progress has been made. So a lot has been done over the years to do that, and this phenomenon here was not alone. It's a remnant or a legacy from colonial America. When the settlers got here, they did a couple of things that were significant. And one of the things they did when they got here was they started cutting down all the trees so they could do agriculture. That's what they were. It was an agrarian society, and there were all these trees, and the trees were great, but they didn't want parks. They wanted to feed themselves, so they cut the trees down. And they started building roller dams. They started building these little dams in the county, and behind those dams, silt filled in, because for a dam to work, it doesn't matter, it's only the water that goes over the top. That's what matters for the energy that you're going to get out of it. So they did that for grain, they did that for sawing wood and things like that. And there was no soil or erosion and soil control at that time. So guess where our topsoil went? It went down and it filled in behind these dams. And that, in a sense, was a clogging of the arteries. And Cory's going to talk with you a little bit about the significance of that and why this project matters in terms of cleaning that up. Now, as to the genesis of the project itself, the Steinman Foundation got to a place a few years back where they decided, we've had the Conestoga House, and it's probably time to let it go. It can be used for other purposes. Let's make a transition here, costing them a lot relative to the value that it was providing to them. So let's make this. And they were aware of some work that some folks at F&M had done on legacy sediments, these sediments behind these dams. They were aware that there were sediments here, and they thought, maybe in the process of doing this, we should at least put some easements on our property before we sell them that would allow us to do some kind of cleanup here in the future if we wanted to do that. And that thought, as they went through that process, led them to conversations with LandStudies, with the folks from F&M, and they began to think about, well, I wonder if you could go further upstream. Maybe we could do that. And as they looked upstream and they looked at what was possible, they realized there was 40 landowners from Marietta Avenue up to above Park City at Shriner Station, and some work went into it, and they said, this is actually something that could get done. How cool would it be if you took a long stretch of a stream in Lancaster, instead of going out and pick off a parcel here and a parcel there and a parcel here, took on a couple of these legacy sediment projects? Maybe it could become a showcase for how to think about cleaning up our streams differently. And I'll just say that in the process of doing that, it became a pretty early question. Well, what if you had a trail along there? And of course, everyone went, oh my gosh, you have no idea how hard that's going to be. But what if we had a trail? What if you could walk along this and you could have education, you could have recreation, you could connect the city of Lancaster to LGH Health Campus, to Park City, to Longs Park. You wouldn't have to ride a bicycle out Harrisburg Avenue and worry about dying. You could, you know what I mean? You could get there in a nice way. And so that's the genesis. The Steinman Foundation has an interest in STEM work. They have an interest in quality of life and what they can do to be a catalyst for those kinds of things in the county. And they have a, sort of a third priority, if you will, environmental and things like that. And these all kind of came together in a neat way. And we have, for an $18 million project, I'll give you a really quick snapshot before I turn it over to Cory. Stream restoration work, while cumbersome and difficult, we'll probably have 15 different grants cobbled together to pay for the stream restoration part. There's money out there because of the Chesapeake Bay to fund that kind of work. Trails are a little harder. Everybody likes trails. Getting funding for them is a little dicier. And so we're going to have a combination of state and federal grants and private donations that will go together to build the trail itself. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but I just want to give that as an overview before we start. Cory, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, John. Good afternoon, everyone. So, again, I'm Cory Rathman. I'm with LandStudies. My role with this project is to oversee the floodplain restoration component of the project. What I want to do, however, is before I get into all the specifics of the project, I want to ask for your indulgence to take a little side trip. I want to encourage you to look at and see streams a little bit differently than you have in the past. I want you to consider wetland meadows, wetland complex adjacent to streams, something similar to what you see in the photograph up here. I want to introduce you to the concept of legacy sediment and its impacts to floodplains and its contribution to the loss of critical wetlands. And I also want you to imagine some things. I want you to indulge me yet again and imagine something. I'd like you to imagine right now that you're standing in one of these meadows, maybe 10 or 20 feet off the edge of the stream. Unless you have boots on, your feet might be wet. You're likely looking at native vegetation. You're seeing dragonflies, butterflies. Maybe you're hearing birds that you don't typically hear in your backyard. You'll glimpse of a turtle, salamander, frogs, anything like that. It's a great and vibrant ecosystem. So now that we're standing there in this wetland, let's talk about it some more. What do these wetlands provide? What are some of the functions that they have? You know, if you're standing in that meadow and you look in the distance and you see rain coming down, you might think, wow, you know, these floodwaters that are going to come are going to impact me immediately. They're going to come right across this from the stream and right into this wetland area. Those floodwaters will likely bring sediment, silt, and that'll deposit in these areas. That silt and sediment will also provide nutrients and food for the microorganisms that are creating all kinds of different biological and geochemical processes that I don't understand. But I do know that part of it is removing nitrogen, a typical pollutant in our streams. It's removing nitrogen from that water. So there are many other functions that I don't talk of. They're all listed here, or some of them are listed here. But what I want to do now is kind of transport you to yet another location from this wetland meadow to this situation, which I consider maybe to be a typical Lancaster County stream. You've got either lawn or maybe it's agriculture that's right up to the edge of the stream bank, or you have trees and shrubs on the other side. But you also see that you've got exposed earthen embankments. You've got active, ongoing erosion. What you don't see, however, is wetland habitat. You don't see any place for flood storage. and you don't see any water filtering or cleaning of the water that's happening in those wetland environments. So here's one of our restoration sites. This is what we call Woodcrest Villa. This is just upstream of Harrisburg Pike. This is actually a photo taken at Harrisburg Pike. And so you might ask, Cory, why are we restoring this location? It looks all right. There are meadows on either side. There's, trees. But if we just go about 150 yards upstream where this photo was taken, you can see that we've got about 4 to 5 foot high banks. And this photo is representative of that entire stretch from Harrisburg Pike up to Shriner Station Road, the covered bridge at Shriner Station. And again, what you can see, exposed earth, actively eroding, no wetland habitat, minimal flood storage, and basically not that environment of that wetland meadow that I asked you to stand in a little bit ago. So you might say, okay, but you want to put wetlands here? Why? Well, they are there. They've always been there. They've just gotten buried. And so what are they buried by? It's the legacy sediment. And many of you probably have heard of legacy sediment before, but just to give you a quick background, legacy sediment is the sediment that's deposited, that has been deposited since colonial times, all the way through colonial times through the present. And it's a result of various activities that occurred back then, typically the removal of forests, as John had talked about earlier, the expansion of agricultural lands, and the building of mill dams. This next slide is just an illustration of what a stream valley looks like that's been impacted by legacy sediments. So you see the historical floodplain that we talked about, and several feet of legacy sediment bearing that historical floodplain. We've got stream channels, but as you can see, they're incised. The stream cuts right through that legacy sediment like butter and creates these little tubes or tunnels that creates highly erosive flows when the rains occur. There's, again, no wetland habitat, no filtering of water, no flood storage. This next slide, again, is just another demonstration of the impact of the legacy sediment. So earlier, again, I asked you to stand in the wetlands, if you will. And so on the left here in that wetlands section, it's where you were, right? You've had the open water to one side, and you're standing with your feet a little bit wet, and then you transitioned into a forested upland. Over on your right there in this, what we're calling the degraded condition, you can see what the legacy sediment is and how it's impacted the wetlands. You're standing there, you're standing on top of several feet of soil, and you've got the water surface on one side, and you're in the middle of the forested upland, but there's no transition zone. There's no wetland impact. There's no wetland habitat there. This is the historical condition that we're looking for, that we ultimately would like to see and restore it if we can. You have multiple channels through a wetland meadow complex. You have the interaction of the groundwater with that stream flow to help cool it down because we've got that groundwater interaction. You have the vegetation, you have the filtering. Clearly there's flood storage. It's planted with native plants. We've got habitat. So we have a great ecosystem that sustains various types of bugs and bunnies and different animals. So you might say, so what happened? Where did it go? Why don't we have that anymore? So as John was talking about, we cleared our forests. We had an insatiable appetite for lumber to build our expanding communities. That's just what happened. It was estimated in the 1600s that Pennsylvania was covered by about 90% of forests. By 1907, that was down to 32%. And you can imagine during that time period, there really wasn't much consideration for erosion control. So you combine that, and we also know that during that time, we were realigning streams. We were draining wetlands to expand our agricultural lands. Basically just doing more and more to change the the look and the feel of our streams. As John also mentioned, there was many, many dams that were built. This is actually a photo from 1926 from the Peckway area where there was a hydroelectric dam. You can see that there's, I don't know, 10, 12 feet of sediment trapped behind that dam before it was breached. So, but in addition to just a hydroelectric dam, there was various other dams that were built, sawmills, dams associated with sawmills, grist mills, flour mills, all kinds of mills. You might say, all right, Cory, but okay, so there were some mills built. How many of them were there really? How much could they have really impacted our streams? Here is a graphic from the Society of the Preservation of Old Mills. These are documented mills and dams. And you can see that they clearly impacted thousands of miles of our streams. These weren't sporadic, but ubiquitous throughout PA and the Mid-Atlantic for that matter. So you start thinking about these dams, plus that erosion, and you can see how that equals the legacy sediment trapped in our streams. So you might also go on to say, well, Cory, okay, so we know that there's legacy sediment there. How do we know where it is or how deep it is? Well, through science and specifically radiocarbon dating. So what you see here is on your right, you can see a backhoe digging a trench. And then what we do is take photographs of the side of that trench. And what we find again and again, you can see the lighter color soil at the top and then the darker color soil at the bottom. The lighter color soil almost always comes back as the legacy sediment, right? And below that is our historical floodplain, and then we get into the basal gravels and bedrock. But that legacy sediment, when we do the carbon dating on that, that 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 feet of soil always comes back to be dated between, of course, present day to about the 17, 16, 1500s, right? So you got 3, 4, 5 feet dating back to the 1600s. That next 6 inches, foot to 18 inches, when we do dating there, that dates back from maybe the 1400s to 12 to 14,000 years ago. So we know that clearly, based on those dates, that legacy sediment has been a result of the settlement that's occurred in the area. So, okay, all right, I'm on board with the whole legacy sediment and the impact. What do we do about it? So we try and restore our floodplains. Again, try and restore our floodplains and wetlands as best as we can, one section at a time. So here's the Little Conestoga corridor. This is our project. The red circles indicate the areas for restoration. Downstream is Marietta Avenue, you can see here, and then upstream, in that area up there is Harrisburg Pike. So just quickly from downstream to upstream, our first circle here is what we call the Conestoga House restoration. It's just downstream of Marietta Avenue. Just upstream of Marietta is the Barcrest restoration. That's been constructed. You may have seen that. You may have seen that as you've driven by on Marietta Avenue. The next site up is the F&M, what we call the F&M restoration location. It's just south of the Norfolk Southern Railroad Bridge. Traveling upstream to the next circle, we're at Mennonite Home, so we're just south of Harrisburg Pike. Just upstream is what we call the Woodcrest Villa restoration. That's the one that I showed you a picture of me in the kayak, so that's that section. And then the next section up is just upstream of the covered bridge at Shriner Station Road, and we call this the Shriner Station Road project. So in total, we're looking at about 1.3 linear miles of restoration. We're looking at 24 acres of floodplain restoration and almost 19 acres of wetlands restoration as part of this project. Additionally, the calculations that we have done based on some expert panel protocols from the Chesapeake Bay, what we're looking at is this project is going to reduce 1.2 million pounds of sediment annually from getting into our streams. Similarly, there will be 5,000 pounds of nitrogen and 1,000 pounds of phosphorus annually prevented from reaching our streams. So how do we do it? We excavate. That black dashed line up there represents the existing conditions of the soil. The dark black line at the bottom represents the floodplain restoration that we want to create. And then, of course, the native plants in between. What do we do? So we excavate. We then seed with native seeds. We install erosion control matting to prevent erosion. We plant it with shrubs and trees, and then we maintain it. So I mentioned that one of our sites has been constructed. This is Barcrest. This is the before picture of Barcrest. It's standing on the Marietta Avenue bridge and looking upstream. The Barcrest apartments would be to your left. Again, similar to what I showed you before, here's the lawn all the way up into the stream banks. What you can't see is the 4-foot high bank and exposed and active erosion occurring. Here we are during construction. You got the track hoe pulling back the embankment, and you can see some of the erosion control matting in the distance. And here's the completed project. This photo was taken about 4 weeks ago. So you can see how if there's a rain event, that stream is automatically, instantly going to interact with that floodplain area. You might say, well, hey, Cory, why didn't you take that floodplain back a little bit farther? There's a 48-inch sewer line that's right in that embankment. So one of the constraints we have in doing restorations within the suburban area is we've got infrastructure, whether it's sewer, water, gas, electric, all kinds of different things that we have to take into account when we're doing the designs of these restorations. One of the things you can see, of course, is that the vertical banks are gone. The active erosion's been eliminated, and the habitat, it's coming. Just need a little time and some patience, but it'll be there. So here's a restoration of the Cory Creek headwaters. And it's, as you can see, a meadow complex, multiple streams. You can imagine the flood storage and the water quality that's happening here. This is what I'm asking you to imagine as you go through your days and you think about streams and what could be there. And specifically, in closing, I want you to think about this site as you think about the blue-green corridor. This is a floodplain restoration of Swar Run. State Road is just in the background. To your right is the new Penn State Hospital. To your left, which is out of the picture, would be the Kellogg's facility, just to give you an idea where we are. But I'm asking you to imagine this. I'm asking us all to imagine this as part of the Little Blue-Green Corridor project so that we can imagine, uncovering what's been buried, planting what's been missing, restoring what's been impaired, and ultimately finding the wetlands that have been lost. And with that, I'll turn it over to Brent. Talk about how you're going to get around all these restorations.
Should I use this mic, or? Well, good afternoon, Brent Good, ELA Group. Really a privilege to be here in front of you today with this project, and thank you. I'm blessed with the trails, which actually is the harder part I'm finding of the project, if you can imagine. Everybody likes to save the environment or restoration, save the bay. But when it comes to the trail, you get a little resistance sometimes from people. It's kind of that not in my backyard mentality, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But I like to walk you through the map, and the red line obviously is the trail. So now you can see where the trail is or where it's proposed to be. And starting on the left side is that area Cory was talking about at the Conestoga House at Marietta Avenue. and looking to start there with a small trailhead in Lancaster Township. And there's 4 municipalities that we're dealing with here. We have Lancaster Township. Well, first let me say, East Hempfield Township is at the top of the map, top of the stream, or on the west side. So we're at left side is the south, right side is the north. So that's East Hempfield Township. And then in the lower left quadrant or south there on the east side is Lancaster Township. And then as you go in towards F&M, it becomes Manheim Township in that location. And then you go all the way up to Mennonite Home. Park City area is also Manheim Township, but actually Park City is part of Lancaster City municipality, and there's a small piece that touches our project. So there's 4 municipalities that we're working with. But just to walk you through this a little bit more, we're looking at 3.3 miles of trail, what you see there in the red. Recently, we've added that western section of Dorwart Park, Farmingdale Trails, working with Lexwama there, and also East Hempfield Township being very cooperative. We're finding a lot of cooperation with all municipalities and landowners, actually. And so the trail, starting there at the south left side, going across Marietta Avenue with a crossing, and then we have the Barcrest Apartments, and then Windsor Court Apartments. We're going to cross back over with another bridge at that point to F&M. We're going under Norfolk Southern, and that's been somewhat of a challenge with the permitting involved with that, but we're making some headway. And then we're going to cross back over again into the Farmingdale Trails Dorwart Park area. And then at that point, you can either go west to what we're considering now our main trailhead, which will be there at along Good Drive. And again, East Hempfield Township, that is their property, and we're working with them to expand that existing gravel drive to a more formalized trailhead to accommodate our project. And then again, if we pick up just north of the railroad, we're in the Farmingdale Trails area, and then we're going to use the existing bridge there at the crossings. And as you know, the crossings has trails, so we're connecting to them. And let me say too, we're connecting to F&M. They have trails, semi-public trails there. And so you're going to see these connections being made, which are so vital to the project and to the greater community. And so if we're at the crossings area, then we cross back over to the creek onto the west side. And why we do that is right there, Route 30, Farmingdale Road, is a barrier, if you would, for the trail. But there's 2 cells to those bridges, and the west cell is open, somewhat filled in with sediment that we're going to help remove. But the east cell is where the main flow of the creek is. And so we're going to go under the bridges, and then we're going to connect into West Roseville Road. There's 3 residents that live on that public road. It's an East Hempfield Township right-of-way. East Hempfield Township is on board working with us to use that road for our trail. We then go out to and connect to another small trailhead that Penn Medicine LGH is working with us. There'll be a smaller trailhead there at the abandoned child care center at this point. There's a parking lot there that there's going to be a few spaces there for us for a smaller trailhead. And then we're going to create a trail paralleling Good Drive, crossing over Harrisburg Pike, onto the Woodcrest Villa retirement area. There's an existing 12-foot wide trail there, or pathway, that we're going to use for our trail. Go out towards the covered bridge, cross over the road again, and then skirt along the Shriner Station Road all the way out, further out there where it dead ends there at the Shriner Station Road. I will say there's talk about using that covered bridge going back to Park City and back to Long's Park. That's a seed that we've been planting, but it's not official at this point. But the idea of connectivity again and making those loops is very attractive. The trail is to be 12 feet wide, and that's quite wide for a trail. If you think about the Susquehanna River Trail is about 8 to 10 feet wide, and if you've been on that trail, there's a lot of high-moving, speeding bicycles, and it can be somewhat dangerous. And so in this more urban area, a 12-foot trail is more appropriate for the volume that we're anticipating. It will be ADA compliant. We talked about all the connectivity, the interaction, and the crossings. And there'll be amenities such as benches and some educational signage along the way of the trail as well. It interacts with the creek where we can, but there's other places, as you can see, it has to go away from the creek for various reasons. This is a map of the Lancaster Active Transportation Plan, what some might call the GOAT Path or the Heritage Trail. Working with the county, the orange part there, is an insert or a blow up on the right-hand side showing that area on the left. The orange is our trail. The county is looking to interact and use our trail as part of the Heritage Trail. The Heritage Plan, Trail Plan, has 5 main goals that we're going to help meet with our project, and that is improve access and connectivity, enhance health. Obviously, people using a trail are out doing fitness activities. It's going to help protect the environment by people using bicycles instead of automobiles from that standpoint, but also make people more aware of the environment and appreciate it. It's going to create economic opportunity because of the connectivity of the different uses being the crossings, LGH, Park City, and those kind of things where people will be able to use their bicycle to go to appointments or go shopping. It's going to increase safety, get people and they're off the roadways so there's not conflicts with automobiles. And then I added another one, and that is public education, because there's a direct connection to the stream environment and that chance for interpretive signage and education in terms of what Cory was talking about with wetlands and stream restoration. Cory showed this graphic before, but it's also good to orient in terms of the trail. You can see there a graphic where it talks about recreational opportunity. That represents the trail and its connectiveness or relationship to the stream and the wetlands or the floodplain. And then off to the left, you see an automobile, and so you see that separation. And so that's kind of a good representation of what the project's about from a cross-section perspective. This is the Warwick-Akron-Ephrata Rail Trail, or WERT as we call it. ELA was involved with this trail. What's a little different about our project and what you know about rail trails have it a little easier in that there's already an existing abandoned railroad right-of-way or easement. We're not blessed with that in our case. John mentioned we have 40 different property owners. Some are larger and some are smaller. And generally, we try to avoid the individual residents. But with our project, we have this where more of a challenge with the easements, because we need the right-of-way or easement ownership to put the trail and maintain the trail. And same with the restoration. Here's another example of the WERT trail at the Newport Road crossing, and we would look to do something similar where the pedestrian stops, looks both ways before crossing. Here's a picture from Landis Homes where a restoration was done, and there's a connection with the trail and a bridge in relation to the stream. This is Susquehanna River Trail, winding in through the woods near the river. Here's an example of a restoration with passive recreation of a bench with the trail, and we would be looking to do similar type situations in our project. This is out at the crossings. We would be connecting to this trail, but there's a riparian area there and an existing trail that's not as wide as the trail we're proposing, but this connects to Long's Park. This is the Conestoga House, so this is the southern area of our project. Some of the other challenges of our project is the permitting of the trail in terms of its approval with the cut and fill in the floodplain. LandStudies and Cory and their group are helping us with that. Also, we need to take these types of plans through all the municipalities for stormwater management plan approval and gain their approval and permits. And like Cory mentioned, working around existing utilities and infrastructure is challenging. And the trail itself, I don't know if John mentioned, is towards that $6 million mark with the bridges. This is, again, the Conestoga House in the southern area, kind of going through some of the landmarks. Whoops. This is the F&M boardwalks. We're going from south to north. This is that Norfolk Southern Railroad trestle that we're going to go underneath. This is the West Roseville Road. It's a beautiful underutilized road that we're going to put line striping on for the trail. And then we kind of end up north at that covered bridge at Shriner Station Road. So I mentioned about the easements and approaching people, and people are more receptive to the stream improvements because of that, wanting to help the environment in the bay, and a little more resistant on the trail easement, that with the attitude of not my backyard, but what we find though is that once people actually become involved and a trail is built, and they come to really love it and enjoy it, and they realize what value it is and to their property. So we're gaining momentum with the project. We are gaining easements. We still have some easements to go. We really appreciate your support. And just lastly, I'll say personally, I wish you all a very blessed Good Friday, and I know Jesus saved me, and I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, can I take a? I know you want to wrap up. Let me just make a couple of real quick comments, and then we'll take some. So, what I hope you picked up here. Can we use this? Okay. A couple of things I hope you picked up here. First is, we're all aware that we had to clean up our streams, and over the years we've worked at getting our businesses to clean up their discharges. So we're aware of that. The 1972 Clean Water Act. We've worked with municipalities to work on their wastewater treatment plants and stormwater and things like that. We've had a lot of focus on agriculture. You still hear about agriculture. I challenge people all the time. If you look around at our fields, we really have made way more progress than we get credit for in Lancaster County. Our farmers are doing a great job. Not that there's not more work to be done on all fronts, but there's 4 different areas that have been focused at. 10, 15 years ago, Bob Walter and Dorothy Merritt out at F&M College, who now have made a huge impact on people's understanding of what you just saw, began to come up with this idea of legacy sediment worker. And we now have Big Spring Run down below Willow Street. We have Landis Homes. We have Rock Lidditz. We have a number of examples, and the science has come in to support all of what was just being said by Brent. And I just would, catch that vision. It's not the solution for everything, but it is a piece of the pie. And they're bigger efforts, they're significant efforts, and they add tremendously to our quality of life. We've had a lot of help from people along the way. I mentioned state and federal agencies. We've also had some private donations along the way, probably too many to really list. But I will say because Alice is here, Alice and LGH were really good friends in working together to put together the trailhead up at LGH that Brent mentioned, and I'm really very appreciative of that support there. We're about 60% funded on the stream restoration, but we have a very clear line of sight to finishing that. I want to say it's a done deal, but we have a very clear line of sight to how that funding will happen. By the end of 2026, 2025, 2026, that should be completely done and taken care of. The trail, we actually are probably clear line of sight to at least probably 80-85% of that funding. However, we need about $2 million of local contributions. So we're in the process of where state and federal grants helped us with the stream restoration. We're looking probably in the neighborhood of $2 million of local money to do a one-to-one match for the state and federal money that's available to us. So a little bit of a lift there yet to do. I think we'll get there, but the private donations are going to become an important part of what we do. And the last thing I would just say is, I hope you're able to catch a vision if you step back and you think about all the work that's been done on clean water, how this project could be a catalyst for other similar projects in similar cities. I can tell you, they are all around us here in Lancaster. There are other pieces that could be done. It could be a catalyst for this work. And how, as we continue to clean the stream up, imagine that 10 years from now, 20 years from now, the Conestoga River is not the dirty river you've grown up with, but it is a nice river. And you're kayaking in it, you're swimming in it, we're using it, we've got amenities on it, we've reopened it to the public, and we could easily have, close to a couple hundred miles of trail here in Lancaster County that's interconnected. I mean, you look at an economic development, a quality of life opportunity that lays ahead of us over the next 10 to 20 years, it's phenomenal. There's just no question about it. And not only is it possible, it's already underway, and a lot of people don't even know it. So thank you for learning about Little Conestoga Creek Blue-Green Corridor, and we're happy to take some questions.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, great. We have time for a couple questions. We'll start over here with Adriana. Why don't you just shout out your question, and then I'm going to just leave the mic with the speakers to respond. So do you want to start? I guess I could walk.
So excited about the trail, especially, can't imagine why. Because connectivity is
I'll just walk it over.
okay. Connectivity is such an important thing for the most vulnerable road users in our county. The ATP is great, and the Greater Heritage Path is amazing. I'm just wondering if you are able to tap into any of the $12.7 million that the city got for Vision Zero, especially since Park City is part of the city. Because getting folks off of an extremely dangerous road like Harrisburg Pike and onto a trail is clearly a safety solution. So I'm wondering if there's any way that you can tap into those funds.
Thanks, Adriana. This is when I get to have my Vienna White moment.
Yeah, I should walk around with a microphone, and then I can talk as I'm walking back. So quickly, the city has been a good partner. I don't know at this point what exactly that will look like. So in that conversation going forward, I don't know. I can tell you that the county of Lancaster has used ARPA funds and some other money and has been very supportive of the project, along the way. And so I'm very grateful for that. I think all of the municipalities, the townships all made financial contributions. Lancaster Township is going to build a trailhead down there as we move along. So we've got 4 municipalities, including the city of Lancaster, that have been involved. How and where they'll fund it and which money they'll draw from, I don't know that for sure.
Yeah, we have a question back here, Brian.
Brian Davidson, thanks for presenting, you guys. Cory, I guess my question is for you. You mentioned maintenance, but I'm curious to when the restoration would stabilize naturally, and then also what kind of maintenance is ongoing.
Getting my stuff in. Hey Cory.
So with regard to maintenance, the maintenance is going to start immediately. And to go back to the vegetation, typically that slide I showed you with bar crest, that should be green within the next month or two. Now, completely stabilized, no, but that matting is there, and that matting will stay there for a good year or two till that vegetation gets sprouted. The last slide, if you recall, that I showed where I asked you to envision what the project looks like, and I said it's Swar Run. That photo was only a year into following construction. So it doesn't take long. Again, it has to do with that connection to the groundwater, the constant flow of water through there. It really, and the connection to that great historical carbon layer that's in there, and things just jump out of the ground. So it typically doesn't take long. And then we have the ongoing maintenance that's part of this project as well.
I would add, so the vision for Steinman Foundation has been to ensure some sort of endowment. We're still working on how to do that for the long-term care and maintenance of both the restoration and the trail. This is a little different than what often has happened in the county, and it's sort of been left in somebody's lap to take care of things. And so we're working out how that'll be. But the idea, we have the easements, and the idea is to take care of it in perpetuity.
Another question from the audience? Okay, here, I'll take one here, and then we'll take it here.
Tom Huber. My question is very simple. Volunteer opportunities.
Any one of us could answer that. I mean, in this construction phase, probably not so much. As it's getting established, we expect there will be tremendous opportunities. What we saw at Landis Homes, for instance, that community just adopted that restoration. We've got Mennonite Home and Woodcrest Villa and the private residences along here. We hope to see that, the Little Conestoga Watershed Association. Even in some of the work that we'll do over the next couple of years in construction, maybe Alliance for Chesapeake Bay or something will help plant trees. So I think there'll be lots of opportunities. We'll have to figure out how to get that notice out to the public, but we would really like the public to engage.
Thanks, John. And I'll take one more question over here.
My question is just on the sediment that's in the Dorwart Trail, but right off Good Drive, that's being laid down. Is that part of what you're doing here as well? What, in terms of overlaying all of that or raising those banks up, is there what you were describing was taking sediment down, but that seems to be building it up. Is that a different concept?
So yeah, the material that was excavated from the Barcrest site was taken to the Dorwart Park site, and that's part of a request by Laxwama because they wanted that material to fulfill a landfill permit that they had with DEP to place that soil there. So it's really not related to the streams in any way, but it's more Laxwama had a need for material, right, to fill out their landfill permitting.
For what it's worth, if you know of somebody close by that wants it, I mean, seriously, there's a general rule about topsoil. I don't know if you know this or not, but if you want topsoil, you're going to pay a lot of money to get it. But if you've got topsoil, you're going to have to pay somebody to take it away. And any location like this that's close enough by, we'd love to have the opportunity. It's topsoil. I mean, for practical purposes, it's clean. It's terrific soil. So.
All right, you heard it here first. If anyone needs any topsoil, we have a good source for you. Thank you so much for our presenters for being with us today. We can give them a round of applause. And yeah, I think a lot of people are really excited about the Little Conestoga Blue-Green Corridor project. So we'll see how this continues to evolve over the next couple years, and then we'll all do this again on bikes and check out the trail. Thank you so much. A video recording of today's forum will be available on our website and YouTube channel sometime next week. So feel free to share that with people who would like to learn more about this project. Our next First Friday forum will be back here on May 5th. In that forum, we're going to learn about the new train station small area plan and including some plans for transit-oriented development projects in the area. So I'm looking forward to that. To get invitations to all of our First Friday forums, you can become an Hourglass member on our website at hourglasslancaster.org. And I wanted to also give a quick pitch. We had a few more slides. A quick pitch for our community forum, which is coming up next week. We're going to bring the president and founder of Strong Towns, Chuck Marone, here to the Ware Center on Wednesday evening. He's going to be sharing some stories from his book, Strong Towns, A Bottom-Up Revolution to Rebuild American Prosperity. I know a bunch of you already have tickets. It's going to be a very interesting event. You can get tickets to that still on our website at hourglasslancaster.org/strongtown. So thank you so much and have a great holiday weekend.